sometimes bad things happen in life, but like I'm not supposed to try to run away from them because people think reading friction is bad. We gotta talk about it. Honestly, because one thing I'm gonna say is that reading friction or reading self-help, actually doesn't matter what you read at the end of the day, because at the end of the day it's all about you, baby. Why do people keep on saying reading friction is bad, it's a waste of time, and reading self-improvement is good for you? Hold up, we need to talk about this. Because honestly, I'm not even trying to say it's bad or not, but what I'm trying to say is like, why is the difference between all that? Self-improvement really focusing about improving yourself. That's what it is. Friction, it really focuses about improving yourself, but in another person's view of their eyes, because at the end of the day, the person is going through a mindless journey with themselves. They're constantly fighting inner battles, inner devils within themselves, and while they're doing that, they're getting to learn more of themselves. Either they become good or they become bad. Same thing. That's what I think about. So in a way, it's kind of like, why do people always have this constant thing of like reading self-friction is a waste of time? Well, we gotta talk about it, because at the end of the day, if you want to write down in the comment about why people think that, hey, write down there so we can start to raffle them up. At the end of the day, we need to have a strong fact if you wanted to back up this thing. So today I'm gonna be talking about 4 things that actually friction actually helps with, and I'm gonna also talk about how friction has actually helped me so much better in the later on of this video. So stay tuned so you can get to know more about what is actually going on with my life. I have a confession to make. I love friction. Honestly, who wouldn't? The constant feeling of adrenaline, what is about to happen, always feeling in tune with the character. Sometimes when you're reading, you have no idea how the character is gonna act, but you're always in that moment as if like you are the character. You are going on those adventurous movies, doing all those things and partying every single day, not caring about anybody else, or maybe if you did, but then you end up coming to a point where you're like, you know what, I don't give a damn about anybody else because I care about me. Have you ever felt that kind of need? Because honestly, hey, I know that if you ever read friction, I'm to a point where you're like, you know what, I am all in on this character. Now what you be thinking, what am I trying to say? Ever felt guilty reading self-help? Because one thing about self-help and reading self-friction is the fact that we never finish the self-help books that we read. I mean, okay, maybe sometimes, but most of the time we never finish. Or sometimes we cannot push ourselves to finish, but halfway through the middle, let's be real, you almost forgot everything that the book was actually talking about. There's no imagination, there's no constant drive, there's no nothing. Yeah, it might spark an aha moment, but honestly, most of the time when you just think about it, it's like, I'm reading to learn. There's always this constant pressure of trying to learn something when you're reading self-help. But if you're reading things like friction and all those things, basically there's no constant pressure. But one thing about them is one of the best ways to learn, because when you're reading something without actually thinking of that you're learning something, you end up having a very positive reflection on how you actually consume and what you learn from it. For example, I was reading this one book from Wattpad. I mean, like, Wattpad. And as I was reading this book from Wattpad, honestly, there was this part where the character just found out that he's about to lose everything. As he was about to lose everything, the character knew that she has to make a decision. In that moment, she was afraid of telling people that she got kicked out from her job, and then she was like stranded, and then she didn't have any house and everything like that. And she felt so frightened because all her family have this high expectation of her. But then when she realized that, you know what, I just lost my job, my house just got burned, and honestly I have no place to live, I have nothing, why am I having so much pride? Why am I trying to run away from? Because at the end of the day, this is what happened. I have to face the reality that I'm living in. And in that moment, it kind of sparked a little bit of curiosity, like, you know what, sometimes bad things happen in life, but like I'm not supposed to try to run away from them, because running away from them is an excuse that just leads to nowhere, honestly. Because sometimes bad things happen, and then when they happen, but because we have this constant pride that we have of ourselves, we end up like not using it. The character was facing a lot of bad things in her life, but the one thing, because she had a very bad relationship with her parents, so she kind of was like, you know what, I don't care, I'd rather live in the streets and everything. But another person was like, hey, you need to stop being so prideful about everything, because honestly what you're doing is not helping you at all. You need to face the fact that you're about to be homeless. So whatever you have some issues with your parents or not, at the end of the day, they are your parents and they still love you. So go back and then fix and then reunite with them. So she ended up dead. Happy ending, obviously, because hey, we never read friction without any happy ending, unless if you're reading dark romance. But other than that, it was one of those things that empowered me to, like, you know what, bad things happen, and in life sometimes you gotta forgive, in life sometimes you gotta move on, in life sometimes you gotta take the final step, and then you gotta stop being so prideful. But if I was reading a book from how to have empathy for others, honestly I wouldn't do that. I don't think that. I mean, like, why would I read a book about understanding human beings? I mean, like, yeah, it's good, But like the best way to understand human beings is to be in a position where you're not even thinking about understanding them. It's almost like, when you're reading fiction and then the character kind of relates to one of your family members, one of the peoples that you know, and you're like, oh, now I know why the person acted like that. Is one of those good feelings. But other than that, self-help has this constant need of pressure. By the way, if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and actually comment down on like which genre of books do you prefer. About reading fiction is that fiction actually helps with empathy. It made me so much better at understanding a human being on another different level, because when I read fiction, I could be able to understand different characters and who they are and their needs. And sometimes, I'll get pissed off because of like, why is this person talking to my character? Because my character is me, because I'm the main person. But then why would this other person do that kind of thing to another person where the person helped them out? And I actually felt this thing, but like, because when you read those things and you end up having to read their background stories and everything like that, you end up having to go like, oh, now I understand. But I wouldn't have done that if I was reading a book of like how to develop empathy. I don't know if there's a book about that. One thing is that fiction actually helps us with understanding people on another different level, so that we can be able to communicate with them, so that the reason why somebody did that kind of thing, even though it might have been bad, the matter, but you kind of have this understanding of this kind of thing. It kind of puts you in another person's shoe, if I can reflect it like that. While when you forgive somebody, most of the time you have to put yourself in that person's shoe most of the time, not sometimes. Some people are like, I will never forgive you, but sometimes when somebody hurts you, when you put yourself in another person's shoe, you can be able to understand the circumstances and be able to see it upon yourself. Maybe this is how I would have reacted. That's why when you read fiction, it actually helps with that kind of thing, and that's a good part. But, and also another thing, reading actually sparks creativity. Hey, have you ever had this constant need when every time you just come up with ideas everywhere, no matter where it is? Well, that's the good thing about reading fiction, because reading fiction actually helps with like generating ideas everywhere when you think about it. Because when you read ideas, you kind of have the spark of a moment when you're like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could see that. Oh, I could look at myself doing that. Oh, okay, this is what I have to do. Okay, I can try taking that part from another character and being able to summarize it down and then become that kind of character, and this is who I am. But when you read fiction, you already know it's like, okay, they're just leveling it up step by step, and this is what you gotta do to achieve what you gotta do, which is not bad at all. But most of the time, let's be honest, we humans, we really don't do well with what they tell us to do. That's what most of the steps are. 5 steps to become this, 5 steps to become that, this and that, this and that. Most of the time we never follow them, because in your mind, honestly, half of the time when you're watching them, it's like, you're telling me what I should do? I don't know. But when you're reading fiction, it's like they're not even telling you, they kind of summarize it in the way of how the character is doing that, and then you view those things sometimes without even when it's summarizing it, and you're like, this character did that, this character did that, I must try to do that for myself. And that's how it is. That's why I think fiction helps with understanding the world much better. For me, I wouldn't be able to understand things like racism, colorism, and all those things, even though I might understand those kind of things. But I understood it so much better while reading fiction, because in fiction they put it in a, I'll say, lighter way. In a way that that, oh, this is what's happening. In a way that you read it and you're not constantly going on danger mode zone, everything in your mind was like alert. You have this constant understanding of like what is going on. It gets you to be able to understand the world at a much better phase. But another bad part is this constant illusion that, life is not always going to be the way it is with fiction. Fiction, at the end of the day, the character end up getting what they want. At the end of the day, the character end up getting what they want, achieving all the milestones in their lives. And then in life, it's kind of daunting. And life looks as if like you're never going to do that. That's why it can always create this, because in life, in fiction, there's always this perfect relationship, perfect family, perfect all this. But honestly, in life, that's not how it is. Another thing is that reading fiction, not only develops our imagination and creativity, it gives us the skill to be alone. It gives us the ability to read empathy for people we never met, living lives we couldn't possibly experience for ourselves, because the book puts us inside the character's skin. That's the good thing about reading fiction, because it's like you get to forget about your life, and that sometimes is good, because life sometimes is daunting, life sometimes is dramatic, life sometimes just needs a little bit of pause where you can stop and not even think about it. So the best most of the time is usually through reading, exercise, and all of those things. And for me, since I kind of do an on and off with exercising, I prefer reading. I'm not trying to say that reading self-help books is bad or not. Honestly, reading self-help is actually good, and but the most important thing is that you gotta have balance between what you're reading. Having balance is something that's important, because like as much as you gotta read, not just like reading self-help, there's no pressure in it because you're reading for enjoyment. But reading self-improvement, you know that you have to put something. It's almost like you're reading it with an intention to better your life, which is kind of good, especially if you're reading books like Atomic Habits, The Daily Laws, Human Nature, all those things, to better understand people, to better understand those things, and you're using them to incorporate them so that you can have an understanding of the human psychology is good. I'm not gonna say it's bad. Even I read them, because in a way, reading fiction, you just read it for no enjoyment, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes, let's be honest, we don't learn anything. When you're done finishing, we just close the book and we're done. But when we're doing fiction, we have this intent that I want to learn this thing, I want this thing. And then if you're serious about them, you can try to implement those skills that I told you about them, and try to see how well they can help you in whatever that you wanted, which is kind of good. So in a way, it's all about having balance in what you're doing and what you're reading. So that's another thing that we need to talk about. Another thing is that reading decreases stress level. I actually never thought about that, but honestly, every time when I was feeling stressed, one thing I realized about myself is that I constantly, if I was feeling stressed and I deleted Wattpad from my book because I was feeling guilty about reading Wattpad for the longest time, I re-downloaded it again. That's my relationship: delete, re-download, delete. And so I thought about, like, since I'm always doing that, but every time when I always felt stressed, or every time when I always felt this constant pressure, this constant feeling of overwhelmed or overstressed, or anything like that, my finger just kind of like the download button and download Wattpad, and I started reading for almost 2 hours a day. 2 hours, but not even 2 hours, I'm lying, okay? The whole day, 24 hours, no sleep. That's how bad it is with my Wattpad. That's why I always, after done reading, I just delete it. I was like, I gotta make it a little bit bad, because like downloading it sometimes, because if you download, you have to delete some memories in your phone storage so that you can download it. So it's like, hey, I'm fighting between the odds every time. So it's like, that's what I did. But it actually helped me with my stress level, because after reading it, I actually sometimes forget about what I was stressing about, and sometimes kind of when I read something and kind of relates to what I'm stressing about, it kind of makes me understand it much better in a way that I never thought I would understand it. So I kind of decrease it, and I never actually thought about that. But honestly, when I look back, every single time when I always felt overwhelmed, every single time when I always felt stressed and everything, I read books. Now I know why it actually does help. It's really good because it actually helps. The final part is, it didn't help with vocabulary. I can never testify to that, because honestly, it never worked for me. Maybe because I was reading fiction. But in a way, the studies found out that actually students who actually read more fiction books, they actually develop a higher vocabulary, because in a way, you know what they say? The best way to learn is when you don't got pressure. That's what it is. For me, yes, I did grab some kind of vocabulary, kind of improved my vocabulary and my writing styles. But in a way, when it comes to vocabulary and spellings, maybe because I'm bad at spellings, I don't know. But other than that, it kind of made it seem effortless when I was like writing my own things and everything. So in a way, reading kind of helped me with my vocabulary. So we gotta thank you to Friction for helping us improve our spellings, that I'm not good at it. They say that reading friction has been known as the Matthew effect from the Bible. If y'all read the Bible, you know what we're talking about. 13 verse 12 says that whoever has will be given more, and they will have in abundance. Whoever does not have, even when they have, will be taken from them. So in a way, it kind of relates to this thing about like rich being rich, poor being poor. It's almost like when you read more, you're constantly gaining knowledge. You're constantly getting exposed to the minds of all those people who've read. And imagine a level of 50 years experience being put in one book. And then you get to understand everybody what's going on in them. But also shown the average vocabulary size right here, where it talks about like honestly all the adders and everything, and how much it actually helped improve their reading techniques and actually improved how they write and everything like that. So you know that next time when you're reading fiction, take it seriously. You're learning something every time. Your brain is almost like, yeah, I'm getting that good book. One thing I said is that reading actually helped me a lot with actually dealing with a lot of traumatic experiences in my life. So guys, have you ever wondered actually, why do we always have this pressure of reading self-help books? Like, why are we always having this pressure of like reading self-help books, reading self-improvement? What are we trying to run away from? Watch this video where it will give you everything that you need.